Elif Shafak, hello. We're very pleased to have you to talk about your latest book, 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. What can you tell us about your book?
Thank you for having me. I've always believed as writers, as novelists, of course, we're very interested in stories, we chase stories, and we love language. But I honestly believe we're equally interested in silences and the things we cannot easily talk about in a society at a given time. At least personally, I do know that I'm always drawn to silences and people who are silenced for various reasons. So there's a part of me that always tries to pay more attention to the periphery rather than the center. People who have been marginalized, disempowered, pushed to the periphery of the society. There's a part of me that wants to give more voice to those who are voiceless and make the invisible a little bit more visible, if I can. So I think in this book, this is also very clear. It has a very unusual start, if I may put it this way, because right away we know that the main character is dead. Actually, the very first words in this novel are the end. It starts with an end. The main protagonist has been killed and her body has been dumped in a garbage bin. She's a sex worker in Istanbul. But I must also say, as an author, I became very interested in these scientific studies that show, interestingly, after the moment of death, after the heart has stopped beating, the human mind can remain active for another few minutes, sometimes up to 10 minutes, which gave me the entire structure for the book. So we do know that Leila is dead, her heart has stopped beating, but her mind is still functioning. And as she remembers her past minute by minute, we travel into her story. But also, if I may say, the story of Turkey, the Middle East, always told through the eyes of those who have been pushed to the margins.
And also, it's very interesting the way you built the book, because we go from each of those minutes, as you said, but we go back into every step of her life. So that's a very interesting way to tell her story.
Yes, it has an unusual structure in that regard, because I don't think human memory works in a linear, progressive way. It is much more chaotic than that. And the interesting thing is, oftentimes we remember bigger chapters in our lives through seemingly small things, like, for instance, the taste of something we ate as a child, or the smell of street food when we were walking on the streets. And in that sense, it's a very sensual book, you know, in which smells and flavors, the sounds of Istanbul are very much alive, because that is how her memory works.
Yes, talking about Istanbul, you mentioned this is a she city. What do you mean by that?
Today, of course, unfortunately, if you go to Istanbul, when you go to Istanbul, you will notice that the streets belong to men, public spaces, urban spaces, tea houses belong to men. It's mostly male-dominated. Istanbul is a fascinating city, and I have so much love for the city, and I honestly think I carry it with me. On the other hand, it makes me sad to see that women do not have equal voice and visibility in the public space. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to remind myself and my readers of this long artistic and cultural tradition, which goes all the way back to the Byzantine times, in which the city was always associated with goddesses or female spirits. Or, for instance, Ottoman poets, they always associated Istanbul with a strong, resilient woman, you know, who has been mistreated, but she's capable of renewing herself. There's a long historical background in literature and art of identifying Istanbul with femininity. And I wanted to revive that tradition. And also, as a feminist, I do believe that women need to be in the public space, diversity of women, women of all backgrounds, you know, of all walks of life. So there's a part of me that wanted to maybe emphasize that as well.
That's interesting, because you also, in a way, give voice to those women we don't hear, that don't have the opportunity to have freedom of language, of freedom to express themselves.
Yeah. Yes. And unfortunately, many women do not, they don't make the headlines. They don't have a voice in the main narrative unless something catastrophic happens to them, right? That's the only time when we hear about their existence. At the same time, there's no doubt that Turkey is a very patriarchal society. It's a very sexist society. I think it's a very homophobic society. It's not easy to be a woman. It's not easy to be a young woman, particularly. But I honestly believe it's not easy to be a young man either. Wherever there's patriarchy, it's not only women who are unhappy, men are unhappy as well, because there's a straitjacket of masculinity that's being imposed. So we need to talk about so many layers of patriarchy. And I think what I have noticed, what I have observed over the years is in a society like Turkey, where democracy, even the dream of democracy, has been shattered to pieces, you also lose respect for and appreciation of diversity. It's not a coincidence that wherever there's a rise in authoritarianism, a decline in democracy, you will see a decline in appreciation for diversity. So if you happen to be different for whatever reason, if you happen to be different in the eyes of the authorities, in the eyes of the mainstream narrative, this could be the color of your skin, it could be your sexual identity, it could be how you look. Whatever reason, if you're different, your life is going to be difficult. That is why I think it's very important for people who are pushed into the margins to build bonds of solidarity and sisterhood. I believe in sisterhood, and I think that's also very visible in this novel.
Absolutely. It's also about friendship and loyalty.
Yeah. True. And actually, at some point, the book mentions that we all have two types of families. We have our blood families and we have our water families. If the family you're born into or you grow up with is loving, kind, tender, caring, that's such a blessing. We should feel grateful for that. Not everyone is as lucky, though. And in a way, particularly to those people, the book is saying, please do not forget, as you keep living, struggling and surviving, you're going to have another type of family, and that's going to be your water family. And our water families are composed of our friends, our companions of the road, in a way. The number of those friends can't be dozens and dozens. I'm not talking about acquaintances, but really solid friendships, maybe 5, 6 maximum. These are the people who are the witnesses of all the journeys that we go through, the seasons that we go through. When we fall down, they pull us up, and we do the same thing for them. So particularly among people who are marginalized, I think water families are all the more important to survive and to be able to breathe in this life.
Yes, and what struck me is that although the subject is quite dark and heartbreaking, the end is somehow luminous and soothing, really.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because that's also how I see the book. It's true that the book deals with difficult subjects, including sexual harassment, gender discrimination, gender violence. None of these themes are easy to explore, and yet we must. But eventually, I think it is an uplifting book. And when readers tell me that they found it uplifting, it really makes me happy, because in my eyes, at least, it is a life-affirming book. It's a book that celebrates diversity, friendship. Maybe it's throbbing with energy. It's not a gloomy book in that sense, and maybe tries to also celebrate resistance. I think art, a big part of art, is about resistance.
Elif, your books are translated into 50 languages, and this one is really a must read. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing today.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
And our thanks also to the Miami Book Fair for making this interview possible. Visit them at miamibookfair.com to access to all their free programming. This is José from Escala TV.